Just one kiss. Single mom begged. Mafia boss pulled her close and whispered, "Make it count." The radiator rattled in the corner of the living room, a dying metallic cough that did nothing to chase away the chill settling into the bones of the small bungalow. Harper Monroe sat at her scratched kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. In front of her, a stack of envelopes sat like a judgment she could not escape. The electric bill was past due, the rent was increasing next month, and the tips from her shift at the diner that evening had barely covered the cost of groceries for the week. She rubbed her temples, exhaling a cloud of visible breath. Los Angeles was not supposed to freeze. It was a city of palm trees and endless sunshine. But tonight, a freak weather system had descended, blanketing the suburbs in a rare, biting frost that threatened to turn into snow. It felt unnatural, heavy, and silent. In the next room, her daughter. Ella was sleeping under 3 blankets, 5 years old and already understanding that Mommy worried too much. Ella had gone to bed without complaining about the cold, merely asking if the sun would come back tomorrow. Harper had promised her it would, but promises felt thin lately. Harper stood up to check the lock on the back door for the 3rd time. It was a habit born of survival, a lingering scar from a past she had run 300 miles to escape. The lock was secure, but the feeling of unease prickling at the back of her neck refused to fade. She walked to the window, peering out into the gloom of her backyard. The sensor light was broken, leaving the yard swallowed in shadow. Something dark disrupted the pristine frost on the grass near the fence line. Harper froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. It looked like a bundle of discarded clothes, or perhaps a large animal. But then it moved. A hand reached out, gripping the frozen earth, dragging a heavy shape forward before collapsing again. It was a man. Fear told her to close the blinds. Fear told her to double-check the locks, grab her phone, and hide in the closet with Ella until the police arrived. But the police meant questions, and questions meant a paper trail. And a paper trail meant that he, the monster she had fled from, might find them. The man outside didn't move again. The temperature was dropping rapidly. If she left him there, he would be dead by morning. Harper cursed under her breath, grabbed her heavy coat, and unlocked the back door. The wind hit her like a physical blow, carrying flecks of ice. She ran across the frozen grass, her slippers soaking through instantly. When she reached him, she gasped. He was large, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark suit that had been ruined by mud and something darker, wetter, blood. It soaked the side of his shirt, turning the fabric stiff. "Hey," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" No response. His skin was terrifyingly cold. Adrenaline surged, masking her own shivering. Harper grabbed him under the arms. He was heavy, dead weight, sheer muscle and bone. She gritted her teeth, digging her heels into the slick grass, and pulled. It was an agonizing struggle, dragging him inch by inch toward the porch. Her muscles burned, and her lungs screamed for air. But she didn't stop until she had hauled him over the threshold and kicked the door shut against the wind. She collapsed on the floor beside him, gasping, her chest heaving. In the light of the kitchen, he looked even more dangerous. His face was sharp-angled, with a jawline that looked like it had been carved from granite, even unconscious. He radiated a kind of lethal power that made the hair on her arms stand up. She couldn't call an ambulance, not with the way he was dressed, not with the holster she just noticed tucked beneath his jacket. Harper retrieved the first aid kit from the bathroom. She had learned how to stitch wounds and clean cuts out of necessity years ago, in a life she tried hard to forget. She cut away his shirt, revealing a jagged, ugly tear in his side. It was a gunshot wound, through and through. It missed the vital organs, but he had lost a lot of blood. She worked quickly, cleaning the area with rubbing alcohol and applying pressure. The man groaned, his brow furrowing in pain, but he didn't wake. She bandaged him tightly, checked his temperature, and covered him with the spare duvet from the hall closet. For 3 hours, she sat in the armchair across from him, clutching a kitchen knife, watching his chest rise and fall. When he finally opened his eyes, it was instantaneous. There was no grogginess, no confusion. 1 second he was asleep. The next, he was awake, his dark eyes locking onto hers with predatory focus. He tried to sit up, flinching as the pain hit him, his hand instinctively going to his waist for a weapon that Harper had placed on top of the refrigerator. "I moved it," Harper said, her voice trembling slightly but her chin held high. "And I stitched you up. You were bleeding out on my lawn." The man stared at her. His eyes were the color of obsidian, bottomless and unreadable. He scanned the room, assessing threats, exits, and finally her. "Who are you?" His voice was a gravelly rasp, dry from dehydration. "Harper, this is my house. You almost died in my backyard." She tightened her grip on the knife handle, though she kept it hidden in the folds of her sweater. "Who are you?" He hesitated. He looked like a man who didn't give names, a man who lived in the shadows. "Vincent, Vincent who?" "Just Vincent." He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. Harper started to reach for him, then pulled back. He caught himself on the edge of the sofa, breathing heavily. "You can't leave," she said. "Not like that. You'll make it 2 blocks before you collapse again." Vincent looked at the door, then back at her. He seemed to be calculating the odds of survival out there versus the risk of staying here. "I can't stay here. It's not safe for you. It's freezing outside, and you have a hole in your side," Harper countered, her maternal instinct overriding her fear. "You stay on the couch, but if you touch me, or my daughter, I will kill you. I don't care who you are." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, passed through Vincent's eyes. He nodded once, slowly, and sank back onto the cushions. The next 2 days were a blur of tension. Harper went to work, terrified to leave Ella alone, but having no choice. Rushing home between shifts to check on the stranger in her living room, Vincent was a ghost. He barely spoke. He spent most of his time staring out the window, watching the street through the crack in the curtains. Harper noticed things about him. He moved with an economy of motion, never wasting energy. He cleaned up after himself despite his injury. And when he looked at the wound she had stitched, he didn't wince. He recognized the handiwork of professional violence. He knew exactly what kind of bullet had hit him. Though he never said it aloud, the dynamic shifted on the 3rd morning. Harper was in the kitchen making oatmeal when Ella padded into the room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Harper froze, realizing she had forgotten to close the living room door. Ella stopped, staring wide-eyed at the giant man sitting on their small, floral-patterned sofa. Vincent looked up, for the first time. The hard mask of his face slipped. He looked at the little girl with a strange expression, caution mixed with a profound sadness. "Hi," Ella whispered, hiding behind the door frame. "Hello," Vincent said. His voice was softer than Harper had ever heard it. "Mommy says you have a boo-boo," Ella said, inching closer. Vincent glanced at his side. "Something like that. Does it hurt?" "Only when I breathe," he said dryly. Though the corner of his mouth twitched upward, Ella giggled. She walked over and placed her stuffed rabbit on his knee. "Mister, Hops helps me when I scrape my knee. He can help you, too." Harper watched, holding her breath, ready to rush in. But Vincent didn't push the toy away. He picked up the worn rabbit with his large, scarred hand, looking at it as if it were an alien artifact. "Thank you," Vincent said solemnly. He looked at Ella, and the darkness in his eyes seemed to recede, replaced by a flicker of warmth. That night, the heater finally gave up the ghost. The rattling stopped, replaced by an ominous silence. The temperature in the house plummeted. Harper sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands, calculating how many extra shifts she would need to afford a repairman. It was impossible. She was already drowning. She fell asleep at the table, exhausted. When she woke up, the house was warm. A steady, comforting hum came from the radiator. Harper blinked, confused, and walked into the living room. Vincent was asleep on the couch, a toolbox that Harper kept under the sink sitting on the floor beside him. He had fixed it, silent, invisible, and asking for nothing in return. As the week went on, the atmosphere in the house changed. The fear Harper initially felt began to mutate into something else, a complex, confusing awareness. Vincent was dangerous, she knew that. The way he scanned a room, the way he slept with one eye open, the scar that ran through his eyebrow, it all screamed violence. But he wasn't unkind. He started doing small things. He tightened the loose hinge on the back door. He stayed awake at night, sitting in the dark by the window so Harper could sleep soundly for the first time in years. One night, Harper stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching him from the shadows. He was sitting by the fireplace, the glow of the embers illuminating the sharp planes of his face. He looked lonely, a deep, aching loneliness that mirrored her own. She went back to bed, but sleep was elusive. Her dreams, usually plagued by memories of shouting and breaking glass, changed. She dreamed of Vincent. In the dream, he wasn't injured. He was standing between her and the darkness, a wall of muscle and resolve. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel small or weak. She felt protected. She felt cherished. She woke up with a gasp, her skin flushing hot despite the winter chill. The tension came to a head 2 nights later. They were in the kitchen, Harper was washing dishes, and Vincent had insisted on drying. Despite her protests that he needed to rest, it was a domestic scene that felt frighteningly natural. "You don't have to do this," Harper said, handing him a wet plate. "You're a guest." "Sort of. I earn my keep," Vincent murmured. He took the plate. As he reached for it, his fingers brushed against hers in the warm, soapy water. Both of them froze. The contact was electric, a jolt that traveled straight up Harper's arm and settled heavy in her chest. She looked up, startled. Vincent was staring at her, his gaze intense, stripping away her defenses. He didn't pull his hand away immediately. For 5 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the thudding of Harper's heart. His hand was rough, calloused, dwarfing hers. It was a hand capable of violence. She knew, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "Harper," he said, her name sounding like a prayer and a warning all at once. She pulled her hand back, water dripping onto the floor. I should check on Ella." She fled the room, her pulse racing, leaving Vincent standing by the sink, staring at his own hands. Later that night, the sound of a shout tore through the silence. Harper bolted upright in bed. It was Vincent. She ran into the living room. He was thrashing on the couch, caught in the grip of a nightmare. He shouted a name she didn't recognize, his body tense, fighting an invisible enemy. "Vincent!" Harper rushed to him, kneeling beside the couch. "Vincent, wake up!" She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder to shake him. He woke with a violent start, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist. His grip was like iron. He pulled her down, pinning her arm, his eyes wild and unseeing. "Vincent, it's me!" Harper cried out, wincing. "It's Harper!" Recognition flooded his eyes, and the ferocity vanished instantly, replaced by horror. He released her wrist as if he had been burned. He sat up, breathing hard, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Did I hurt you?" "No," Harper whispered, rubbing her wrist. "You were dreaming. I shouldn't be here," he rasped, turning his face away. "I'm a danger to you." "To the girl." "You're hurt," Harper said softly. She didn't move away. Instead, she reached out, tentatively touching his arm. "You're human, Vincent." He turned back to look at her. The distance between them was non-existent. Harper could feel the heat radiating off him. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the unspoken thing that had been building between them since she found him in the snow. Vincent's gaze dropped to her lips. Harper's breath hitched. She found herself leaning in, just an inch, drawn to him by a magnetic force she couldn't control. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted to know what it felt like to be held by a man who could burn the world down but treated her like glass. Vincent leaned in too. His hand came up, hovering near her jaw. His eyes were dark, hungry, and full of pain. Then he stopped. He squeezed his eyes shut and pulled back, putting a foot of distance between them. The loss of his proximity felt like a physical coldness returning. "Go to bed, Harper," he said. his voice rough and final. "Please." Harper stood there for a moment, humiliated and confused, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "Okay," she whispered. "Good night." She retreated to her room, closing the door with a soft click. She leaned against the wood, touching her lips, wondering why the almost kiss felt more shattering than any actual kiss she had ever experienced. Down in the living room, Vincent didn't go back to sleep. He stood up and walked to the window, moving the curtain a fraction of an inch. The snow had stopped, leaving the street eerily quiet. But down the block, 2 houses away, a black sedan sat idling. Its headlights were off, but the engine was running, puffing white exhaust into the freezing air. Vincent watched it for a long time. He knew that car. He knew the way it sat heavy on its suspension. They had found him. He looked toward the hallway where Harper and Ella slept. A cold resolve settled over him, harder than the ice outside. He had allowed himself to pretend, for a few days, that he could just be a man fixing a heater. But reality had arrived, idling at the curb. Danger was not just coming. It was already here. The morning light was gray and unforgiving, filtering through the frosted window panes to illuminate the tension that had taken residence in the kitchen. Vincent stood by the back door, his posture rigid. He looked less like a guest and more like a soldier preparing for a deployment he did not expect to survive. His dark coat was buttoned, concealing the bandage around his midsection, and his eyes were fixed on the icy driveway. "I have stayed too long," Vincent said, his voice low and devoid of room for argument. "Every hour I remain here puts a target on this house." Harper stood by the counter, gripping her coffee mug with both hands as if the ceramic warmth could anchor her to the floor. She shook her head, stepping into his line of sight. "Look outside, Vincent," she urged, pointing toward the window. "The news said the black ice is covering the interstate. They've already reported 10 accidents this morning. If you go out there in a car, let alone on foot, you're not going to make it 5 miles. Vincent clenched his jaw, a muscle feathering beneath the skin. He knew she was right. He had seen the sheen on the asphalt, the way the world had frozen over during the night. But the memory of the sedan idling down the street was a heavier weight than the ice. "It is safer for me to take my chances with the ice than for you to take your chances with who is looking for me," he countered. "Just one more day," Harper pleaded, the desperation in her voice surprising even her. "The salt trucks are coming through this afternoon. Just wait until the roads are clear. Please, if you leave now and crash, everything you survived in my backyard was for nothing." Vincent looked down at her. She was wearing an oversized sweater, her hair messy from sleep, looking soft and fragile against the harsh backdrop of his reality. He hated that he wanted to stay. He hated that the thought of walking out that door felt like tearing a stitch. "One day," he conceded, the words sounding like a sentence. "But keep the curtains drawn, and do not let Ella play near the windows." Harper nodded, relief washing over her, though it was quickly replaced by the anxiety of the day ahead. She had to go to work. The diner did not close for ice, and she could not afford to lose the shift. Leaving Vincent alone in her house felt different today. Before, he was astray, and she was nursing back to health. Now, he felt like a loaded weapon she was hiding in her living room, one she was terrified would go off, and yet, one she was terrified to lose. The diner was warm, smelling of grease, old coffee, and maple syrup. Harper moved through her shift on autopilot, pouring refills and wiping down tables, her mind constantly drifting back to the man sitting in her living room. She wondered if he was in pain. She wondered if he had eaten the sandwich she left him. Around 2 p.m. The bell above the door chimed. A gust of freezing wind swept through the diner, followed by a heavy, deliberate footfall. Harper froze in the middle of wiping table 4. She knew that walk. She knew the heavy thud of those boots before she even looked up. Damon. He stood in the entryway, shaking snow from his leather jacket. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way that had deceived her 5 years ago. His eyes scanned the room, bypassing the few patrons huddled in booths and locked onto her with possessive precision. Harper's breath hitched in her throat. She gripped the dish rag until her knuckles turned white, forcing herself not to run. Damon walked over to the counter, sliding onto a stool right in front of her station. He didn't smile, he just watched her, his gaze heavy and suffocating. "You look tired, Harper," he said. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, like a razor blade hidden in silk. "I am working." "Damon," she said, keeping her voice steady. "What do you want? Is that how you greet the father of your child?" "You are not her father," Harper snapped, the fire of protection flaring in her chest. "You lost that right when you put your hands on me." Damon's eyes darkened. He leaned forward, encroaching on her space across the counter. "I have changed. Harper, I have got new friends now. Powerful friends. I can take care of you. You and the kid. You do not belong in a dump like this, scraping for tips." "I am happy here," she lied. "Leave us alone." Damon laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Happy? I see the way you look. You are scared. You are lonely." He reached out, his fingers brushing the back of her hand as it rested on the counter. Harper yanked her hand away as if he were made of fire. "Don't touch me," she hissed. Damon's expression flattened, the charm evaporated, leaving something ugly and raw underneath. "You think you can hide from me, Harper? I know where you live. I know what time you drop the kid off at school. I am always watching. Eventually, you are going to realize you need me." He stood up, dropping a $20 bill on the counter. "Buy Ella something nice. Tell her Daddy is coming home soon." He turned and walked out, leaving Harper shaking. She stared at the money on the counter, fighting the urge to vomit. He was watching. He had been watching. The sanctuary she thought she had built was made of glass, and he was holding a stone. The walk home felt miles longer than usual. Harper checked over her shoulder every 10 seconds, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. When she finally unlocked her front door and stepped into the warmth of her house, she nearly collapsed with relief. Vincent was in the kitchen, sharpening a knife. He paused as she entered, his dark eyes instantly scanning her face. He saw the tremor in her hands, the pale cast of her skin, the way her breath was coming in shallow gasps. "What happened?" Vincent asked. It wasn't a casual question. It was a demand. Harper hung her coat up, turning her back to him. She couldn't tell him. If she told him about Damon, about the threat, he might try to intervene. And if he intervened, the police would come, or Damon's new friends would get involved. She couldn't drag Vincent into her messy, broken life. He had enough enemies of his own. "Nothing," she said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Just a long shift. The roads are terrible." Vincent stared at her back. He didn't buy it. He could smell the fear on her, metallic and sharp. He set the knife down slowly. "You are a terrible liar, Harper. I am fine. Vincent, really?" She busied herself with the kettle, her hands shaking so bad the water sloshed over the rim. Vincent watched her for a moment longer, then reached into his pocket. His burner phone buzzed against his palm. He pulled it out, shielding the screen from her view. It was a text message. Short, brutal. "Checkpoints missed. We know you are north of the city. The contract is doubled. No one walks away." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. The hit was still active. They were closing in. And now, Harper was terrified of something she refused to name. The walls were closing in from both sides. Later that evening, after Ella had been put to bed, the house settled into a heavy silence. The wind howled outside, rattling the window frames. Harper sat on the rug in front of the fireplace, staring into the flames. Vincent sat on the couch behind her, the distance between them filled with unsaid words. "He found me," Harper whispered. Vincent didn't ask who. He just waited. "My ex," she continued, her voice trembling. "Damon, he came to the diner today. He said he is watching us. He said he is coming back." She turned to look at Vincent, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "I ran away 3 years ago. I changed my name. I moved 300 miles, and he still found me." Vincent's face darkened, a storm gathering in his eyes. He touched you? No, not today. But he used to. She hugged her knees to her chest, the shame of the confession burning her throat. He used to hurt me. And today, looking at him, I felt small again. I felt like I was back in that house, waiting for the first punch. Vincent leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The lethal calm he usually wore cracked, revealing a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. He will not touch you again. You can't promise that, Harper said, a tear finally escaping to track down her cheek. You're leaving tomorrow. Harper, I just want to feel safe, she interrupted, her voice breaking. She scrambled up from the floor and sat next to him on the couch. Acting on a desperate, frantic impulse, she needed to overwrite the memory of Damon's cold touch. She needed to feel something real, something powerful that was on her side. Kiss me, she whispered, leaning toward him. Vincent froze. He looked at her lips, then up to her eyes. He saw the fear there. He saw desperation. She wasn't asking for him. She was asking for a shield. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away the tear, his touch impossibly gentle. But when she leaned in, closing her eyes, he didn't close the distance. He held her there, inches away. No, he murmured. Harper's eyes flew open, hurt flashing across her face. She tried to pull away, humiliation flooding her veins, but he held her fast. Do not look at me like that, he said, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together. I want to kiss you. Harper, God, I want to kiss you. Then why? Because you are scared, he said intensely. You are looking for a place to hide. I will not be that for you. I will not be in a panic room. He leaned in closer, his forehead resting against hers, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a mesmerizing intensity. When I kiss you, he whispered, the promise vibrating in the air between them. It won't be for safety. It will be because you want me, because you cannot help yourself, and I will not stop at just one. Harper shivered, the breath leaving her lungs in a rush. It wasn't a rejection. It was a declaration. She pulled back slightly, nodding. Okay. They sat in silence for a long time. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The house was freezing, the drafts defeating the heater's efforts. Harper was shivering, partly from the cold, partly from the adrenaline crash. Without a word, Vincent shifted. He reached out and pulled her onto his lap. Harper gasped, her hands landing on his chest to steady herself. He was solid, warm, a furnace against the chill of the room. He adjusted her so she was sitting sideways, her legs curled up, her head resting against his shoulder. Just for warmth, he muttered, looking at the fire. Just for warmth, she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. But it was more. He wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her secure. Harper could feel the steady, powerful thrum of his heart beneath her palm. She could smell the scent of him, soap, leather, and something uniquely masculine. For the first time in years, she closed her eyes and didn't see Damon's face. She saw a future where protection wasn't a cage. She drifted into a half-sleep, dreaming of a life where she didn't have to look over her shoulder. A life where a man like Vincent stood between her and the world, not to control her, but to stand beside her. A sharp cry pierced the air. Harper jolted awake. Ella! She went to scramble off Vincent's lap, but he was already moving. He lifted her off gently and was on his feet before she fully registered what was happening. By the time Harper reached the hallway, Vincent was already in Ella's room. Harper stopped in the doorway, her heart clenching. Ella was sitting up in bed, sobbing, clutching her blanket. Vincent was sitting on the edge of the mattress. He looked wildly out of place, a dark, dangerous figure in a room filled with pink fairies and stuffed animals, but his demeanor was incredibly soft. It is okay, Vincent was saying, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. It was just a bad dream. Nothing can get you in here. The monsters were coming, Ella sobbed, reaching out for him. Harper watched, stunned, as Vincent, The man who had walked into her house with a bullet hole in his side, the man who was being hunted by killers, lifted her daughter into his arms. He rocked her gently, his large hand patting her small back. "I know about monsters," Vincent whispered to the child, "and I know how to scare them away. As long as I am here, no monster is going to come near this room. I promise." Ella buried her face in his neck, her sobs quieting to hiccups. Harper leaned against the doorframe, tears pricking her eyes again. She had built walls around her heart so high and thick she thought nothing could ever breach them. She thought she was done with trust. She thought she was done with hope. But watching Vincent Moretti hold her daughter with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew about him, she felt the masonry of those walls turn to dust. She wasn't just scared for him anymore. She was falling for him. Vincent stayed until Ella fell back asleep. When he finally stood up and turned to the door, he found Harper watching him. He paused, his expression guarded again, waiting for her to tell him he had overstepped. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, brushing past her into the hallway. "Get some sleep. Harper, I will take the first watch." Morning came with a deceptive brightness. The sun was out, glistening on the snow that still blanketed the neighborhood, making the world look clean and new. Harper woke up to the sound of the front door closing. Panic flared instantly. Had he left? She ran to the living room, pulling her robe tight. Vincent was walking back in from the porch, his face grim. He held something in his hand, a shattered piece of black plastic and glass. "What is that?" Harper asked, her stomach dropping. Vincent walked over to the table and dropped the debris. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. Was a camera," Vincent said, his voice cold and detached. "It was mounted on the streetlight across the road. Someone smashed it during the night." Harper stared at the broken pieces. "Damon?" "Maybe," Vincent said. He looked at her, and the look in his eyes sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the look of a man who had run out of options. Or maybe the people looking for me, whoever it was, they did not want to be recorded. He walked to the window, peering through the slit in the curtains. "Pack a bag." "Harper, what?" "Pack a bag for you and Ella," he commanded, turning to face her. "Essentials only. We have been found." "Found by who?" "By everyone," Vincent said. "We're leaving. Now." The city of Los Angeles looked different from the 30th floor. From the cracked sidewalk of Harper's suburban neighborhood, the city was a distant, smog-choked promise of something better. Up here, behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass, it was a sprawling grid of diamonds and darkness. Harper stood in the center of the living room, her duffel bag heavy on her shoulder. The penthouse was cold, modern, and aggressively masculine. It was all steel, black leather, and polished concrete. It smelled of nothing. No lavender laundry detergent, no burnt toast, no life. It was a fortress, not a home. "I cannot stay here, Vincent," Harper said, her voice tight. The ride over had been silent, a high-speed blur through back alleys and service roads to avoid being followed. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of her situation was settling in like a stone in her stomach. This feels like a cage. Vincent was by the wet bar, pouring a glass of water. He set the pitcher down with a sharp clink and turned to face her. He had shed his suit jacket, revealing the holster that never left his side. "It is a fortress. Harper, there is a difference," he said, calmly. "The elevator requires a biometric scan. The glass can stop a sniper round. There are 4 guards in the lobby and 2 on the roof. No one gets to you here. No one." "And what if I want to leave?" Harper asked, the old panic flaring in her chest. She had spent years escaping a man who locked doors from the outside. The luxury of the prison did not matter if she did not hold the key. Vincent walked over to her. He stopped 2 feet away, respecting the invisible line she had drawn in the sand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card. He held it out to her. "Then you leave," he said simply. "This elevator pass overrides the security protocols. You can walk out that door right now. You can take Ella and go back to the suburbs, or anywhere else you want." Harper looked at the card, then up at his eyes. There was no deception there, only a grim exhaustion. "I'm not keeping you here," Vincent said, his voice dropping an octave. "I am keeping you alive. But the choice is yours." Harper hesitated, her fingers trembling as she took the card. It felt heavy in her hand. She looked over at the sprawling sectional sofa where Ella was already bouncing, delighted by the view of the tiny cars below. "Okay," Harper whispered, sliding the card into her pocket. "We stay until the roads are clear." Vincent nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction, "until it is safe." The first few days in the penthouse were a study in contrasts. Harper and Vincent circled each other like two planets from different galaxies forced into the same orbit. The silence of the apartment was filled with the strange friction of their lives overlapping. Vincent was a man of violence who was trying to learn peace. Harper was a woman of peace who was being forced to learn violence. On the second afternoon, Vincent found Harper in the expansive gym that took up the east wing of the penthouse. She was hitting the heavy bag, her form sloppy, her wrists bending dangerously with every strike. "You're going to break your wrist like that," he said from the doorway. Harper jumped, spinning around. "I was just venting." "Venting is useless if you cannot defend yourself," Vincent said. He walked onto the mats, removing his watch. "Make a fist." Harper hesitated, then curled her hand. Vincent stepped in close, wrapping his large hands around hers, correcting the alignment of her thumb, straightening her wrist. His touch was clinical, professional, but the heat of his skin burned through her focus. "Power comes from the hips, not the arm," he instructed, positioning himself behind her. He placed his hands on her waist to guide the movement. "Twist here. Drive through the target." Harper struck the bag. A solid thud echoed through the room. "Better," Vincent murmured, his breath brushing her ear. "Again?" For an hour, he trained her. He taught her where to strike to disable a man twice her size. He taught her how to break a hold. And with every instruction, Harper felt a shift. She wasn't just learning to fight. She was learning that she was allowed to fight in return. Harper brought life into the sterile gray box of his world. She filled the fridge with actual food. Replacing the rows of bottled water and protein shakes, she dragged Vincent into the kitchen, ignoring his protests that he didn't cook. "You can field strip a weapon in 30 seconds, but you cannot chop an onion?" Harper teased, handing him a knife. "I have people for this," Vincent grumbled, eyeing the vegetable with suspicion. "Well, tonight you have me," she said. "And Ella wants spaghetti." Ella sat at the island counter, swinging her legs, giggling as the feared mafia boss struggled to mince garlic without crushing it. By the time dinner was served, the kitchen was a mess. Flour dusted the black granite counters, and Vincent Moretti had tomato sauce on his pristine white shirt. He didn't wipe it off. He sat at the table with them, listening to Ella ramble about cartoons, and for the first time, the penthouse felt like a home. The nights were the hardest. The city lights bled through the sheer curtains, painting the living room in hues of amber and electric blue. Harper often found Vincent awake, standing on the balcony or sitting in the dark, guarding them even when the doors were locked. One evening, a week into their stay, Harper walked into the living room to find Vincent watching Ella sleep on the couch. The little girl had fallen asleep during a movie, her head resting on a throw pillow. Vincent was sitting in the armchair across from her, just watching, his expression unreadable. "She trusts you," Harper said softly. Stepping into the room, Vincent looked up. "She shouldn't. She is a child. She doesn't know better." "Kids know better than anyone," Harper countered. She walked over and sat on the arm of his chair. It was a bold move, closing the distance he usually maintained. "She knows you are safe." Vincent let out a rough laugh. "I am not safe. Harper, you know that. You are safe for us," she said. She reached out, her hand hovering for a split second before she let her fingers brush against his hair. It was thick and soft, contrasting with the hardness of his face. Vincent went still. He didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing, a long, ragged exhale leaving his chest. Harper traced the line of his jaw, her thumb brushing over the rough stubble. "You are tired, Vincent. I have not slept a full night in 10 years. he admitted, his voice a low rumble. "Sleep tonight," she whispered. "I will watch the door." He opened his eyes, looking up at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He reached up, his hand covering hers on his cheek, pressing her palm against his skin. "You are the first man I trust to touch me," Harper confessed, the words hanging heavy in the air. Since before Ella." Vincent's grip on her hand tightened. He stood up slowly, forcing Harper to stand with him. The air between them crackled, electric and heavy. He didn't rush. He waited, giving her every chance to run, to back away, to put the wall back up. But Harper didn't move. She tilted her head back, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Vincent lowered his head. The first brush of his lips was a question. Soft, tentative, testing the waters. Harper let out a shaky breath and pressed into him. The kiss deepened, shifting from a question to an answer. It was slow, intense, and devastatingly raw. It wasn't the kiss of two teenagers fumbling in the dark. It was the kiss of two broken people, finding the matching pieces of their souls. Vincent tasted like scotch and danger. Harper tasted like rain and hope. He groaned low in his throat, his hands sliding down to her waist, pulling her flush against him. For a moment, the world outside the glass walls ceased to exist. There was only the heat of his body, the roughness of his hands, and the terrifying realization that she was falling in love with a man who could destroy her. He pulled back first, his forehead resting against hers, both of them breathing hard. "Harper," he rasped, "I cannot promise this ends well." "I know," she whispered, "but I am still here." The fragile peace shattered 2 days later. Harper had woken up early, the bed beside her empty. Vincent had insisted on sleeping on the couch again, maintaining a gentleman's distance after that kiss. Though the tension between them was palpable, she wandered through the penthouse, looking for him. She found a door at the end of the hallway that she had assumed was a closet or a utility room. It was slightly ajar. Curiosity, that dangerous thing, pushed her forward. She nudged the door open. It wasn't a closet. It was a command center. The room was dark, illuminated only by the glow of a dozen monitors mounted on the wall. Maps of the city were spread across a central table, but it was the screens that made Harper's blood run cold. Surveillance footage, timelines, photos of men with red X marks over their faces, and in the center of the main screen, a paused video feed of a warehouse, and a photo of a man. "Damon," Harper gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Vincent spun around from the desk chair. He was wearing a headset, which he ripped off instantly. "Harper, get out!" But she was already moving into the room, her eyes glued to the screen. There were dossiers on the table, photos of Damon meeting with men she didn't know. Timelines that went back weeks. "You knew," she whispered, the betrayal slicing through her like a knife. "You knew where he was." "You've been tracking him." "Harper, listen to me." Vincent stood up, moving toward her. "No!" She backed away, her hands shaking. "You used me. You brought me here not to keep me safe, but to lure him out. I am just bait to you, aren't I? Just a pawn in your war." "That is not true," Vincent said, his voice hard, authoritative. "Then why is his picture on your wall?" she shouted, pointing at the screen. "Why are you tracking my abusive ex-boyfriend unless you are using him to get to someone else? You lied to me." "I did not lie," Vincent roared, the sudden volume making her flinch. He stopped, seeing her fear, and forced himself to lower his voice. "I am tracking him because he is working with the people who tried to kill me. He's the link. Harper, he sold you out to get to me. He told them where I was that night in your backyard." Harper froze. "What?" "Damon is not just a jealous ex. He's a low-level runner for the cartel moving into the city. He knew I was wounded. He knew I might seek shelter. He's been watching your house long before I got there, hoping I would show up so he could sell my location." Vincent walked around the desk, his eyes blazing with honest fury. "If I did not care about you, you would never have seen this room. I would have left you in that house to deal with him alone. I am tracking him, to end him, to make sure he never comes near you or Ella again. I don't believe you," Harper stammered, the trauma of her past clouding her judgment. All she saw was another man moving pieces on a board, with her life as the wager. "I am leaving. I am taking Ella and I am leaving." She turned and ran. "Harper!" She sprinted down the hallway, her bare feet slapping against the hardwood. She needed to get to the bedroom. Get Ella. Get the key card. Vincent caught her before she reached the living room. He didn't grab her arm or pull her hair. He simply moved faster than she could, stepping in front of her to block her path. "Move!" she seethed, trying to shove past him. It was like shoving a brick wall. "Stop running!" Vincent commanded. "I am done being controlled," she yelled, lashing out, her fists hitting his chest. "I am done being protected by men who only want to own me." Vincent caught her wrists. He didn't squeeze. He just held them against his chest, right over his heart. "I do not want to own you." "Harper," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to save you. There is a difference." He backed her up until her back hit the wall of the hallway. He loomed over her, boxing her in, but not touching her anywhere but her hands. His eyes were dark, swirling with anger, frustration, and something else, something hot and undeniable. "You think this is a game to me?" he growled, leaning down until his nose brushed hers. "You think I brought you into my bed, into my home for strategy? Look at me." Harper looked up, tears streaming down her face. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear of losing her. "I would burn this city to ash before I let him touch you," Vincent whispered. "Do you understand?" The fight went out of her all at once. The anger dissolved into the overwhelming, terrifying need that had been building for days. "Show me," she challenged, her voice breaking. Vincent didn't hesitate. He released her wrists and framed her face with his hands, crashing his mouth onto hers. This kiss was nothing like the first. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. It was desperate, hungry, fueled by the adrenaline of the argument and the fear of the truth. Vincent lifted her, his hands gripping her waist, and Harper wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer, needing to feel every inch of him. He carried her down the hall, not to the guest room, but to the master bedroom. He kicked the door shut, locking out the world, locking out the screens and the wars and the danger. He set her down on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling as he touched her face, her neck, her shoulders. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice a wrecked whisper. "If we do this, I cannot go back to being just a guest in your life." "I don't want a guest," Harper said, reaching for him. "I want you." That night, the darkness of the room was heavy with confession. They made love with a slowness that belied the violence of their lives. It was a shedding of armor. Every touch was a reclamation. When Vincent kissed the scars on her soul, he was promising that no one would ever add to them again. When Harper held him, feeling the ridges of the bullet wound she had stitched, she was accepting the danger that came with loving him. It wasn't just physical. It was a conversation without words. It was Harper letting go of the shame Damon had instilled in her. It was Vincent letting go of the belief that he was too damaged to be touched. Later, in the quiet hours of the morning, they lay tangled together under the sheets. The city lights outside were distant stars. Vincent held her against his chest, his arm draped protectively over her. "I'm going to finish this," he whispered into the darkness, his lips brushing her temple. "I'm going now to clear the board, and then we figure out what comes next." Harper closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She knew what he meant. He was going to war. But for tonight, in this bed, in this moment, there was peace. The war room was silent except for the hum of the server cooling fans and the scratching of Vincent's pen against paper. He had abandoned the digital maps for a large physical blueprint of the warehouse district spread across the mahogany table. He looked different today. The softness that had unraveled in the bedroom the night before was gone, replaced by the cold, calculated armor of a man preparing for violence. Harper stood in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee she had made for him 20 minutes ago. It was cold now. She watched him draw red circles over entry points, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was planning a counterattack. He was planning to kill people. She looked over her shoulder at the living room, where Ella was drawing pictures of the skyline. Ella was safe here, behind the glass and the guards, but for how long? Harper felt a familiar sickness coiling in her stomach. She had run from Damon to escape violence, to escape the feeling of walking on eggshells. Now, she had fallen in love with a man whose entire life was built on a foundation of bullets and blood. Was she just repeating the pattern? Was she simply trading a chaotic monster for a disciplined one? Vincent looked up, sensing her presence. His eyes softened instantly, but the transition was jarring. "Is everything okay? You tell me," Harper said, walking into the room and placing the mug on a coaster, far away from his maps. "You have been here since dawn." "I'm closing the net," Vincent said, his voice low. "We have located the main hub of the operation. Tonight, I will start dismantling them piece by piece." "And what happens when they push back?" Harper asked. "What happens when the war comes to this building? To Ella?" "It won't," Vincent promised, but promises were cheap currency in his world. The reality of that danger arrived 4 hours later. Despite Vincent's protests, Harper had insisted on being the one to pick Ella up from her private kindergarten. She couldn't stand being cooped up in the tower any longer. Vincent had compromised, sending a convoy of 2 armored SUVs and 4 guards to escort her. The school pickup line was a chaotic sea of parents and luxury cars. Harper stood by the gate, her eyes scanning the playground. She saw Ella's pink backpack first, bobbing toward the exit, then she saw him. Damon was standing by the teacher, a charming smile plastered on his face. He was wearing a suit, looking every bit the respectable father. He was reaching out, his hand hovering inches from Ella's shoulder. "I am her father," Harper heard him say smoothly to the young teacher. "There was a mix-up with the custody schedule. I am here to take her for the weekend." The teacher looked hesitant, checking her clipboard. "I don't have your name on the list, sir." "Oh, come on," Damon laughed, stepping closer to Ella. "Look at her. She knows me. Don't you, sweetheart?" Ella looked up, her eyes widening in terror. She froze, clutching her backpack straps. "No!" Harper screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. She broke into a run, ignoring the shocked stares of other parents. "Get away from her!" The guards were already moving. 2 of Vincent's men intercepted Damon before he could touch the child. They didn't draw weapons, too many witnesses, but they effectively walled him off, their sheer size making Damon look small. Damon didn't fight, he backed away, raising his hands in mock surrender, that oily smile never leaving his face. He looked over the guard's shoulders and locked eyes with Harper. He mouthed 2 words, tick-tock. Then he turned and melted into the crowd, disappearing before the guards could decide whether to detain him. Harper grabbed Ella, pulling her into a crushing embrace, burying her face in her daughter's hair. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. He had been there. He had been inches away. Back at the penthouse, the explosion was immediate. Vincent didn't yell at Harper. He didn't yell at the guards. He simply picked up a heavy crystal decanter of whiskey and hurled it against the far wall. It shattered with a deafening crash, amber liquid and glass spraying across the minimalist art. "He was at the school," Vincent snarled, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "He walked right up to her. He tried to take her," Harper whispered, sitting on the sofa, her arms wrapped around herself. Ella was in her room watching a movie with noise-canceling headphones, oblivious to the storm raging in the living room. He acted like he had the right. Vincent stopped pacing. He turned to Harper, his expression grim. "It is not just about you anymore. Harper, it never was." "What do you mean?" "Damon is not working alone. He's not just a disgruntled ex-boyfriend holding a grudge." Vincent revealed, the truth spilling out. "He is the point man for the scrambling of the hierarchy in this city. The rival families are using him. They know he is your weakness, and they know you are mine." Harper stared at him. "He's using me to get to you." "He's using you to break me," Vincent corrected. "He knows that if he threatens the girl, I will become reckless. I will make mistakes, and today, he proved he can get close." Harper stood up slowly. The room felt like it was spinning. "So my daughter is a pawn in a gang war?" "No," Vincent said, stepping toward her. "She is family. "She is 5 years old," Harper shouted, tears finally spilling over. "She shouldn't have to be guarded by men with guns. She shouldn't be leveraged." She backed away from his reaching hand. "This world, your world, it is going to destroy ours. I thought I could handle it. Vincent, I thought I could be strong enough, but I can't, not when it comes to her." She turned and walked out of the room, the slam of the bedroom door echoing like a gunshot. Vincent stood alone in the wreckage of the living room. He felt a hollow ache in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a boy. Fear, not for his life, but for the loss of the only good thing he had ever found. He needed answers. He needed to know how to fight a war without burning down the garden he was trying to protect. An hour later, Vincent sat in a visitation booth at the state penitentiary. The glass partition was thick, scuffed, and smeared with fingerprints. On the other side sat an old man in a beige jumpsuit. His hair was white, his face lined like a road map of a violent history, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and identical to Vincent's. Antonio Moretti picked up the receiver. "You look terrible, son." "I am losing," Vincent said, skipping the pleasantries. "I have the tactical advantage. I have the men. I have the money. But I am losing." "The woman?" Antonio asked. He didn't need details. He knew his son. "She is terrified," Vincent admitted. "Her ex is working with the Rossi crew. He tried to grab her daughter today. I want to burn the city down. Pop, I want to slaughter every single one of them." "That is the soldier talking," Antonio said, his voice rasping through the phone line. "The soldier solves problems with fire. The soldier protects the asset by locking it in a vault." "She is not an asset," Vincent snapped. "Then stop treating her like one," Antonio countered sharply. He leaned forward, his chains rattling against the metal counter. "You have her in that penthouse, behind glass, surrounded by guards. You are treating her like a tactical weakness that needs to be fortified. That is why she is pulling away. She doesn't want a warden. Vincent." Vincent gripped the phone tight. "If I don't protect her, they will kill her." "There is a difference between protection and possession," the old man said. He looked at Vincent with a rare expression of pity. "If she is your piece, don't protect her like a soldier. Love her like a man. A soldier fights for someone. A man fights with them. You have to give her a choice, or you have already lost her." Vincent stared at his father for a long moment. Then he nodded, hung up the phone, and walked out of the prison. By the time he returned to the penthouse, the sky had opened up. A torrential downpour was hammering against the city, turning the skyline into a blur of gray and neon. He found Harper on the terrace. She was standing in the rain, oblivious to the cold, her arms wrapped around the railing as she looked out at the storm. She was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes clinging to her frame. Vincent opened the glass door and stepped out. The wind whipped at his coat. He didn't say a word. He just walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. Harper stiffened for a second, then melted. She turned in his arms, burying her face in his soaked shirt. "I am sorry," she sobbed, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "I'm so scared, Vincent." "I know," he said, holding her tighter, shielding her from the worst of the wind. "I know. And I am sorry I made you feel like a prisoner." He pulled back to look at her. Rainwater was streaming down his face, mixing with the intensity in his eyes. "We're leaving." Harper blinked, wiping water from her lashes. "What?" "You were right," Vincent said. "This is not a life for Ella. It is not a life for you. I have a villa in Tuscany. It is quiet, safe. No one knows about it. We will pack tonight. We will leave in the morning." "You would do that?" Harper asked, hope blooming on her face, fragile and desperate. "You would just leave? The business, the war? I would leave everything for you." Vincent lied. It was the first time he had lied to her, and it tasted like ash in his mouth. He kissed her then, a desperate, searing kiss in the pouring rain. It was a kiss of goodbye, though she didn't know it. He kissed her with all the words he couldn't say, with all the apologies he would never get to make. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the building, but neither of them moved. They clung to each other. Two drowning people trying to stay afloat in a hurricane. "Okay," Harper whispered against his lips. "Okay, let's go." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. They packed bags. Harper woke Ella, telling her they were going on a big adventure to a place with castles and pasta. The little girl was groggy but excited. Vincent moved through the penthouse with mechanical efficiency. He made calls. He arranged the jet. He secured the transport. But while Harper was in Ella's room packing toys, Vincent went into the master bedroom and opened the hidden safe in the closet. He didn't pack clothes. He pulled out a Kevlar vest and strapped it tight over his chest, concealing it beneath a thick black turtleneck. He checked the clip of his sidearm. He slid a knife into his boot. He wasn't going to Italy. Not tonight. He knew that if he left now, Damon and the Rossi crew would follow. They would hunt them to the ends of the earth. There was no running from this. The only way to be truly free, the only way Harper and Ella would ever be safe, was if the threat was eliminated. All of it. He had to cut the head off the snake. He walked out into the living room. Harper was there, zipping up a suitcase. She looked up, smiling, her eyes bright with the promise of a new beginning. "The car is downstairs," Vincent said. "My driver, Marcus, is going to take you to the airfield. The pilot is ready." Harper frowned. "Take us? Aren't you coming in the car?" "I have one last loose end to tie up here," Vincent said smoothly. "I have to destroy the files in the server room. I cannot leave any trace for them to follow. I will be right behind you. I will meet you on the plane in 1 hour." It was a plausible lie, but Harper hesitated. She looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the bulk of the vest under his shirt. She saw the darkness in his eyes that no amount of love could fully scrub away. "Vincent," she said warningly. "Go," he said, kissing her forehead quickly. "Get Ella to safety. I will see you soon." He turned and walked toward the private elevator before she could argue. The doors slid shut, cutting off her view of him. Harper stood in the silence of the penthouse. Something was wrong. The air felt too heavy. She looked down at the table where he had left his phone, not his burner, but his personal one. It lit up with a notification. "Team Alpha in position at the docks. Damon is on site. We move on your signal." The blood drained from Harper's face. The docks. He wasn't destroying files. He was walking into a trap. He was going to face Damon and an entire army alone to buy them time to escape. "No," she whispered. "No, you idiot!" She grabbed her keys. She looked at Marcus, the driver who had just entered to take the bags. "Take Ella," Harper commanded, her voice shaking but fierce. "Take her to the plane. Guard her with your life. Do not let anyone near her. Miss Monroe." "The boss said—" "The boss is going to get himself killed," Harper shouted. "Do as I say. Take her to the plane." She didn't wait for an answer. She ran out the door, bypassing the elevator and sprinting for the stairwell. She had to beat him there. She had to stop him, because if he thought he could sacrifice himself for her peace, he was wrong. She didn't want peace without him. She wanted him, and she was going to fight for him, even if she had to walk straight into hell to do it. The rain had turned the shipping yards into a blurred watercolor of gray steel and black asphalt. Harper gripped the steering wheel of her car until her knuckles turned white, the tires screeching as she drifted around a corner, ignoring the authorized personnel only signs. Her heart was not beating, it was vibrating. A frantic bird trapped in her ribcage. She had raced here to stop Vincent from throwing his life away. She had raced here to drag him back to the light. But 10 minutes ago, a phone call had shattered that objective and replaced it with a terror so cold it made the storm outside feel like a summer breeze. Marcus, the driver Vincent trusted, had not answered her call. Instead, she had received a photo from an unknown number. It was the back seat of the armored SUV, the door hanging open. Ella's pink backpack abandoned on the floor mat. Damon had her. He hadn't just waited at the docks for Vincent. He had intercepted the escape route. He had taken the most precious thing in Harper's world to ensure Vincent would walk willingly into the slaughter. Harper slammed on the brakes as the warehouse loomed ahead, a massive, decaying structure of corrugated metal. The SUV Marcus had been driving was rammed against a concrete barrier near the entrance, steam rising from the crushed hood. "Ella," Harper whispered, throwing the door open. She didn't have a weapon, she didn't have a plan. She had the feral, terrifying instinct of a mother whose child had been taken. The sound of gunfire erupted from inside the warehouse, a rhythmic, deafening staccato that cracked through the thunder. They had started. Harper didn't run away. She ran toward the noise. She slipped through a side door that had been blown off its hinges, ducking low. The air inside was thick with dust, smoke, and the acrid smell of cordite. The cavernous space was a maze of shipping containers and rusted machinery. High above, rain hammered against the tin roof, drowning out everything but the loudest explosions. It was a war zone. Vincent's men wearing tactical vests were pinned down near the entrance, trading fire with a group of mercenaries entrenched on the upper catwalks. Muzzle flashes illuminated the dark like strobe lights, freezing moments of violence in terrifying clarity. Harper pressed herself against a cold steel container, covering her ears as a bullet ricocheted off the metal inches above her head. She scanned the chaos, looking for two things: a small girl and the man she loved. She saw him. Vincent was moving through the center of the warehouse, abandoning cover to push forward. He was a force of nature, firing with lethal precision, dropping two men on the ground level as he advanced, but he was reckless. He wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting to get to the office structure at the far end of the floor. He took a hit. Harper gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A spray of red erupted from Vincent's shoulder, spinning him around. He stumbled, dropping to one knee, but he didn't stay down. He switched his weapon to his other hand, gritted his teeth, and kept moving. "Vincent!" She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of an automatic weapon. She followed his gaze. High up on the metal platform of the overseer's office, illuminated by a hanging industrial light, stood Damon. He was holding Ella. Damon had one arm wrapped tight around the little girl's waist, lifting her feet off the ground. On the other hand, a silver pistol was pressed against her temple. Ella was screaming, her face wet with tears, her legs kicking uselessly in the air. The sight snapped something inside Harper. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. Vincent was pinned. He was bleeding heavily, trapped behind a forklift as bullets rained down on him from Damon's crew. He couldn't take the shot at Damon, not with Ella so close, not with his dominant arm shattered. Harper looked around. She was in the shadows, unnoticed. Damon's men were focused entirely on Vincent. She spotted a narrow maintenance ladder leading up to the catwalk, 20 feet behind where Damon was standing. Harper moved. She didn't sneak. She sprinted through the gaps in the gunfire, climbing the ladder with trembling hands. The metal was slick with condensation and grease. She hauled herself up onto the grating, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was 30 feet in the air now. Below, the battle raged. Ahead, Damon stood with her daughter, shouting down at Vincent. "Come out, Moretti!" Damon yelled, his voice cracking with manic triumph. "Come out and die, or the girl bleeds!" Vincent rose from behind the forklift. He held his hands up, his gun dangling from one finger, then dropping to the concrete. He stepped into the open, blood soaking the entire left side of his black turtleneck. "Let her go, Damon," Vincent shouted, his voice rough with pain. "This is between us." "It is all connected," Damon laughed. "You took everything from me. You think you can just walk in and take my woman? Take my place?" Harper crept forward. The grating groaned under her weight. Damon spun around. He saw her. His eyes went wide. "Harper? Let her go!" Harper screamed, lunging forward as she didn't have a weapon, but she had desperation. She grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher mounted on the railing and swung it with every ounce of strength she possessed. Damon tried to turn the gun toward her, but the heavy metal cylinder slammed into his forearm. The bone cracked with a sickening sound. The gun skittered across the metal grating and fell over the edge to the floor below. Damon howled in pain, his grip on Ella loosening. "Run, Ella! Run!" Harper shrieked, shoving her daughter toward the stairs. Damon recovered faster than Harper expected. With a snarl of rage, he backhanded Harper across the face. The force of the blow sent her crashing into the railing. Stars exploded in her vision. Damon grabbed her by the throat, pinning her against the precarious metal barrier. "You want to be a hero?" Damon spat, blood spraying from his lip. "Then watch him die." He reached into his jacket for a second weapon. Below them, Vincent roared. He had seen Damon strike her. The sight overrode the shock, the blood loss, and the agony in his shoulder. He didn't dive for cover. He didn't look for his dropped gun. He drew the backup piece from his ankle holster in one fluid motion. He didn't aim for the center of mass. Damon was shielding himself with Harper's body. Vincent breathed out. The world slowed down. The sounds of the gunfight faded into a dull hum. All he saw was the sliver of Damon's leg visible behind Harper's jeans. Make it count. He pulled the trigger. The shot was impossible. It threaded the needle between the railing and Harper's hip. The bullet tore through Damon's thigh, shattering the femur. Damon screamed, a high-pitched, animalistic sound. His leg buckled instantly, and he collapsed, his grip on Harper's throat releasing as he fell to the grating, clutching his shattered leg. "Harper, jump!" Vincent yelled. Harper didn't look back at Damon. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed the sobbing Ella, who was huddled by the stairs, and practically threw them both down the metal steps. "Go! Go!" Harper cried, shielding Ella's body with her own as they reached the ground floor. Vincent was waiting for them. He was pale, his skin gray and clammy, but he was standing. He grabbed Harper with his good arm, pulling her close for a split second, checking her face for damage. "Did he hurt you?" he rasped. "I am fine." Harper wept, touching the blood on his chest. "Vincent, you're shot." "We have to move," he said, his voice tight. "More are coming." They moved as a unit, a broken, bleeding family. Vincent led them toward the rear exit, firing blindly behind them to keep Damon's remaining men at bay. His aim was wavering. He was stumbling, his weight leaning heavier and heavier on Harper. They burst out of the warehouse into the cold night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and black. "Almost there," Harper gasped, half carrying him now. "The car. We can take the car." But they didn't make it to the car. Vincent's legs gave out. He didn't fall. He simply ceased to function. He crumpled, sliding out of Harper's grip to the wet pavement. "No!" Harper dropped to her knees, skidding on the gravel. "No, no, no, Vincent!" She rolled him onto his back. His eyes were half open, glazed and unfocused. The blood was everywhere now, pooling black on the ground beneath him. "Ella!" Harper choked out. "Ella, give me your jacket!" The little girl, terrified but brave, whipped off her small denim jacket. Harper pressed it against the wound in Vincent's shoulder, leaning her entire body weight onto it to staunch the flow. "Stay with me," Harper begged, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain and the blood on her hands. You promised we would go to Italy. You promised." "Vincent." Vincent blinked slowly. He looked at Ella, then at Harper. A faint, ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I cleared the board," he whispered, his voice bubbling wetly. "You are safe." "I don't care about safety," Harper cried, her voice cracking. "I care about you. You don't get to die. Do you hear me? You don't get to leave me." She moved her hand from the wound to cup his face, smearing blood on his cheek. His skin was freezing. "Just one kiss," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "Please, Vincent, just one kiss." It was a callback to the night in her kitchen, when she had asked him for a kiss to feel safe, and he had refused. He had told her he wouldn't kiss her until it meant everything. Vincent's eyes focused on hers one last time. He summoned the last dregs of his strength to lift his hand, his fingers brushing her lips. "Make it count," he breathed. Harper closed the distance. She kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, frantic pouring of her soul into his. It was a plea to the universe, a transfer of life force. She kissed him with all the anger of the past 3 years and all the hope of the last 3 weeks. She kissed him until she tasted the iron of his blood and the salt of her tears. For a moment, he kissed her back, a weak pressure against her lips that told her he was still there, still fighting. Then, his hand dropped from her face, his head rolled back. "Vincent?" Harper pulled back, shaking him. "Vincent!" In the distance, the wail of sirens began to rise, cutting through the night air. Blue and red lights flashed against the warehouse walls, getting closer. Ella started to cry again. "Mommy, is he sleeping?" Harper checked his pulse. It was there, thready, weak, fluttering like a dying moth, but it was there. "He's alive," Harper whispered, fiercely wiping her eyes. "He is alive!" Tires screeched across the pavement. A black van, unmarked, skidded to a halt 10 feet away. 2 men jumped out. Harper recognized one of them. It was the guard from the penthouse door. "Get him," the guard shouted. "Move! The police are 2 minutes out." They rushed forward, lifting Vincent's limp body with practiced efficiency. "Wait!" Harper stood up, grabbing Vincent's hand as they loaded him onto a stretcher in the back of the van. "Where are you taking him?" "We have a secure facility," the guard said, looking at the approaching police lights. "We cannot take him to a hospital. They will arrest him on sight, and his enemies will finish him off in the ward." He looked at Harper. "You cannot come. If you disappear with us, the police will launch a manhunt for a missing woman and child. It will bring too much heat. You have to stay." "No," Harper sobbed. "I can't leave him. You have to," the guard said firmly. "If you want him to live, let him go. Cover for him. Buy us time." He pulled Vincent's hand from hers. The van doors slammed shut. The engine roared, and the vehicle peeled away, disappearing into the labyrinth of the shipping yards just as the first police cruiser drifted around the corner. Harper stood alone in the rain, clutching her daughter's hand, her clothes stained with the blood of the man she loved. The police car slammed to a halt. 2 officers jumped out, guns drawn, flashlights blinding her. "Hands in the air! Let me see your hands!" Harper raised her trembling hands. "Are you injured, ma'am?" the officer shouted, lowering his weapon slightly as he saw the child. Harper looked at the spot on the pavement where Vincent had collapsed. The blood was washing away in the rain. She looked at the officer, her face a mask of tragedy and resolve. "I am okay," she said, her voice hollow. "A man, a stranger. He saved us. He saved my daughter from the gang inside." "Where is he now?" the officer asked. "Scanning the perimeter?" Harper pointed toward the dark ocean, toward the shadows where the van had vanished. "He left," she lied. "He said he had to go." She pulled Ella close, burying her face in her daughter's neck so the officer wouldn't see the truth burning in her eyes. "Come back to me," she prayed silently. "Make it count." The diner smelled exactly the same as it always did. Burnt coffee, lemon polish, and the greasy comfort of frying bacon. But everything else had changed. The bell above the door chimed, and Harper Monroe did not flinch. She did not look over her shoulder with the frantic, hunted energy of a rabbit sensing a wolf. She simply wiped down the counter, her movement steady and deliberate, and looked up to greet the customer with a calm that had been forged in fire. It had been 6 weeks since the night at the docks, 6 weeks since the sirens, the blood on the pavement, and the unmarked van that had vanished into the rain, taking the only man she had ever truly loved with it. The police investigation had been a whirlwind of confusion and bureaucracy. Damon was gone, his body found at the scene, a casualty of a gang war that the news anchors called a violent restructuring of the underworld. Harper had given her statement with the precision of an actress. She was a bystander, a victim of a carjacking gone wrong. A stranger had intervened. She didn't know his name. They had believed her because they wanted to. It was easier to close the file on a dead gangster than to hunt a ghost who had saved a mother and child. Harper finished her shift as the sun began to dip below the suburban horizon. She untied her apron, folding it neatly. Her manager, a gruff man named Earl, nodded at her. "Are you doing okay, Harper?" he asked, as he had every day since she returned. "I am doing fine, Earl," she said, and for the first time, she meant it. She walked out the back door to her car. Ella was safe at her grandmother's house for the afternoon, a grandmother Harper had reconnected with after years of isolation. Damon's death had broken the chains of fear that had kept Harper running. She was free, but freedom felt strangely empty. When she reached her car, she saw it. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a thick, cream-colored envelope. There was no stamp, no return address, just her name, written in a sprawling, powerful hand she had only seen once before on a map in a war room. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a sudden, violent rhythm that made her feel alive for the first time in weeks. She snatched the envelope and ripped it open, her fingers trembling. Inside, there were 3 things. A plane ticket, first class, one way, departing tomorrow morning for a private airstrip in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, a heavy, old-fashioned iron key, and a note written on heavy cardstock. If you still want that kiss, come find me. Harper stared at the words until they blurred. She traced the ink with her thumb. He was alive. He had kept his distance, just as the guard had warned, letting the heat die down, letting the police close their files. He had waited until she was safe, until the dust had settled, to call her home. She didn't go back to her apartment to think it over. She went straight to her grandmother's house, packed Ella's bags, and told her they were going on a vacation to see the ocean. "Is Mr. Vincent going to be there?" Ella asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit as Harper buckled her into the car seat. Harper looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror, her eyes shining with tears she refused to shed. "I hope so. Baby, I hope so." The journey was a blur of airports and anticipation. The private jet was quiet, luxurious, and staffed by men who looked at Harper with a deferential respect that told her exactly whose payroll they were on. They landed on a small, sun-drenched runway cut into the jungle, miles away from the tourist traps and crowded beaches. A car was waiting. It drove them along a winding coastal road, the Pacific Ocean crashing against the cliffs below. The water a brilliant, impossible turquoise. The air here was different, hot, salty, and smelling of hibiscus and freedom. The car turned up a gravel driveway lined with palms, stopping in front of a sprawling white stone villa that looked like it had grown out of the cliffside. It was secluded, protected, and breathtakingly beautiful. "We are here, Miss Monroe," the driver said, opening the door. Harper stepped out, shielding her eyes from the glare. The villa was silent. A large wooden door stood open, leading to a courtyard filled with flowering vines and the sound of a fountain. "Ella, why don't you go with the nice lady to get some lemonade?" Harper said, nodding toward the housekeeper who had appeared with a warm smile. "Okay," Ella chirped, running off toward the kitchen, unbothered by the new surroundings. Harper took a deep breath and walked through the house. It was open air, the breeze flowing through the rooms, carrying the scent of the sea. She walked out onto the main terrace, which overlooked the ocean, and there he was. Vincent was standing by the stone railing, looking out at the horizon. He was wearing linen trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a stark contrast to the black suits and tactical gear she was used to. He leaned heavily on a cane with his left hand, and even from the back, she could see he had lost weight. The broad, powerful shoulders were still there, but there was a fragility to him now, a testament to the recovery he had endured in secret. Harper stopped. Her shoes made a soft sound on the stone tiles. Vincent stiffened. He didn't turn around immediately. He gripped the railing with his free hand, his knuckles turning white. "I didn't know if you would come," he said. His voice was rougher than she remembered, textured by smoke and pain. "You sent me a plane ticket," Harper said, her voice shaking. "You knew I would come." He turned slowly. The sight of him knocked the wind out of her. He had a new scar running from his temple into his hairline, fading but visible. His face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But when they locked onto hers, the fire that ignited in them was familiar. It was the same look he had given her in the snow, in the penthouse, and on the wet pavement of the shipping yard. "Harper," he breathed. She didn't walk. She ran. She crossed the terrace in 3 strides and crashed into him. Vincent dropped his cane, bracing himself against the railing as he caught her with his good arm, burying his face in her neck. For a moment, she just held him, breathing in the scent of him, sun and soap and the underlying, undeniable scent of Vincent. He was real. He was solid. He was warm. Then She pulled back, tears streaming down her face, and slapped his chest with the flat of her hand. It wasn't a hard blow, but it was filled with weeks of agony. "You idiot," she sobbed, hitting him again, weaker this time. "You absolute idiot. You let me think you were dying. You let them take you away." "I had to," Vincent rasped, catching her hand and pressing it against his heart. "I had to make sure you were clear. If I had stayed, if I had let you come with me, you would have been an accessory. I couldn't let them put you in a cage." "Harper, so you put yourself in a hole instead?" she cried, grabbing the front of his shirt. "I waited, every day, I waited. I know," he whispered. He wrapped both arms around her now, ignoring the pain in his healing shoulder, pulling her flush against him. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry." Harper melted. The anger evaporated, leaving only a profound, aching relief. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder, sobbing the last of her fear into the linen of his shirt. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "You will never lose me," Vincent vowed, his lips brushing her ear. "I told you, I don't die easily." They stood there for a long time, holding each other as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The ocean roared below them, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat that matched their own. Later that evening, after Ella had been fed and tucked into a massive bed that she declared was fit for a princess, Harper and Vincent walked down the stone steps to the private beach below the villa. A bonfire had been built in the sand, the flames crackling and dancing in the gentle wind. They sat on a blanket, watching the sparks drift up toward the stars. Vincent poured 2 glasses of wine. His movements were still slightly stiff, guarding his left side, but he looked more at peace than Harper had ever seen him. The tension that used to live in his jaw, the constant scanning of the perimeter, it was gone. "Is it really over?" Harper asked quietly. Accepting the glass, Vincent looked at the fire. "The Rossi crew is dismantled, the territories have been divided, and the name Vincent Moretti is listed in the police files as deceased." Harper's eyes widened. "Deceased?" "It was an expensive arrangement," Vincent said with a faint, wry smile. "But necessary to the world. The man who ran the city is dead, buried in an unmarked grave." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "That life is gone. Harper, I meant what I said. I am done. I have enough money in offshore accounts to last us 3 lifetimes. We can stay here. We can go to Europe. We can go anywhere you want. But I am never picking up a gun again unless it is to defend this family." Harper looked at him. She saw the truth in his eyes. He had laid down his sword. He had traded his empire for a stretch of sand and the woman sitting next to him. "And what about you?" she asked, reaching out to trace the scar on his hand. "Can you live without the power, without the war?" Vincent caught her hand, intertwining their fingers. "I never wanted the war. Harper, I was born into it. I inherited it. I fought because it was the only way to survive." He looked at the villa, where a single light burned in Ella's window, then back at Harper. "Power is waking up in a cold penthouse, wondering who is going to betray you today," he said softly. "This, sitting here with you, knowing my daughter is sleeping safely upstairs, knowing I don't have to look over my shoulder. This is the only power I ever wanted." Harper's heart swelled. She scooted closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. "We survived." "We did," Vincent murmured, kissing the top of her head. "We walked through fire, and we got burned," Harper added, thinking of the scars they both carried, his on his skin, hers on her memory. "Burns heal," Vincent said. "Scars just prove we were stronger than what tried to hurt us." The fire crackled, a log collapsing in a shower of sparks. The night air was cooling, but Harper felt warm. She felt anchored. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running towards something or running away from something. She was just here. She lifted her head, looking at Vincent. The firelight danced across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the depth of his dark eyes. He was looking at her with a hunger that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with the soul. "You sent me a note," Harper whispered. a playful smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Vincent smiled back, a genuine, devastating smile that reached his eyes. "I did. You said something about a kiss." "I did." "Well," Harper challenged softly, "I flew 2,000 miles. I am here." Vincent set his glass down in the sand. He turned his body toward her, wincing slightly as his leg adjusted, but ignoring it. He reached up, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing over her bottom lip. "I told you," he whispered, his voice dropping to that low, rough timbre that made her shiver. "When I kiss you, it won't be for safety. It won't be a distraction." "What is it for?" Harper asked, her breath hitching. "For us," Vincent said. "For everything." He leaned in. The kiss was slow, deliberate, and overwhelmingly powerful. It tasted of wine and sea salt and redemption. It wasn't frantic like the kiss at the warehouse, and it wasn't testing the waters like the kiss in the penthouse. This was a claim. It was a promise made against the skin. Harper sighed into his mouth, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. She felt the solid weight of him, the beat of his heart against her chest, the reality of his survival pressing into her. She poured everything into the kiss. The lonely nights at the diner, the terror of the snowstorm, the fear of the gunfight, and the overwhelming, terrifying love she felt for this dangerous, damaged man. Vincent kissed her back with a reverence that bordered on worship. He kissed her like she was the oxygen he had been fighting for his entire life. He deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, groaning low in his throat as the passion flared, hot and bright as the bonfire beside them. They broke apart slowly, breath mingling, foreheads resting together. Harper kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feeling of his hand on her neck, grounding her. She opened her eyes. Vincent was watching her, his gaze raw and open. "That kiss," Harper whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "It saved me." Vincent smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. He looked at her with a lifetime of devotion in his eyes. "Then let me spend the rest of my life earning it." The ocean continued to crash against the shore, the fire continued to burn, and under the vast, star-filled sky, Harper Monroe and Vincent Moretti sat together, no longer running, finally home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been an incredible journey with Harper and Vincent, from the frozen suburbs to the coast of Mexico. I hope you enjoyed the finale of Just One Kiss. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment down below telling me your country or city. If you enjoyed this series, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss a new episode. And finally, please share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section in English. Did Vincent redeem himself? Was the ending what you hoped for? I can't wait to read your feedback. Until next time, keep dreaming.